power plant, if you don't report a safety concern, you're violating federal laws. But that's difficult to prove. Who knows what? That's, in the industry, that's called a chilling effect. If people are afraid to raise safety concerns and therefore remain silent, you can't fix the problem you don't know. So it's not a good situation for the workers at a nuclear power plant, who are the canaries in a coal mine, to feel that they can't openly express safety concerns when they see them. Just over 2 years ago, there was a problem, there was a disaster at the Fukishima Daiichi nuclear power plant in Japan. 3 reactor cores melted down, 6 spent fuel pools were at jeopardy. The NRC's concern over one of those spent fuel pools led to the federal government recommending that U.S. citizens in Japan evacuate out to 50 miles away from the plant. It was later determined that concern was conservative. The situation wasn't as bad as the NRC feared, but the potential was there. It wasn't the NRC was making that up. They had some legitimate reasons for having that fear and acting to protect Americans from that fear. So we thought the NRC, even though hindsight showed that it was perhaps not necessary, it was still the right thing to do based on what they knew at that time. So we're not criticizing that aspect of it. The NRC formed a task force to look at Fukushima and draw lessons learned that could be applied to U.S. reactors to reduce their vulnerability to that threat. That threat really wasn't a tsunami. So plants in Kansas and Michigan and Minnesota are vulnerable to what happened to Fukushima, even though the initiator won't be a tsunami. Our reactors are vulnerable to what that tsunami produced, which was a lack of power at the plant. All of our reactors, as well as those in Japan, have 3 layers of protection for power. The first layer is the electrical grid that provides power to all the plant equipment. The earthquake took that away at Fukushima. Other things can take that away at U.S. plants, so the grid itself can fail. The backup to that at Japan and U.S. reactors are emergency diesel generators at the plant site that automatically start up and provide power to a subset of equipment needed to cool the reactor core. Each reactor at Fukushima, each reactor at U.S. plants has at least 2 emergency diesel generators, only one of which is needed to provide that safety function. The others, in case there's more than 2, are there as a redundant backup, increased reliability. If both of those are unavailable, then the third layer of protection is provided by batteries. In Japan, they had 8 hours worth of battery capacity. In U.S. plants, most of our reactors only have 4 hours, about a dozen have 8 hours. Doesn't really matter because the power at Fukushima was out for 9 days, so whether you have 4 or 8-hour batteries, that just changes the timeline of your meltdown, not the destination. To address that, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission last March ordered owners to come up with seamless, indefinite power sources. For the first phase, approximately 8 to 12 hours, you're to rely on permanently installed equipment at the plant. From 12 to 72 hours, you can rely on portable pumps, portable generators, connectors, and other equipment if it's at the plant sites already and it's not going to be damaged by whatever threat puts you in that need, whether it's a hurricane, tornado, ice storm, whatever. The NRC wants to be sure that that equipment survives that threat so it can be used to deal with the consequences. Beyond 72 hours, the NRC is they're mandating that plant owners can get help in from off-site, basically call in the cavalry. The NRC will accept that on a couple of conditions. One is that equipment's already staged somewhere. It's not like they have to go out to Home Depot and buy it. It's got to be already sitting somewhere dedicated to increased reliance that it will be there if that need arises. In addition, the NRC wants to be sure that it can be another problem with the sentence, that it can get to the plant sites within that 72-hour time frame. So if you're relying on something that could take out a bridge or a road or disrupt transport, then that's not acceptable. So the NRC wants to see that not only that it's there, but it can be transported to where it's needed in a time. So we think that was a very good way of dealing with what happened at Fukushima, primarily the loss of power. When this is implemented, this will provide pretty good protection against that. Our only concern with this option, it's more good than bad, so I don't mean to overblow this concern, but we're concerned about that equipment, the training, and other quality assurance aspects of this backup equipment. It's not considered the same as emergency equipment, so we're a little bit concerned, and I'll allude to that a little bit later, about the measures necessary to ensure that it's reliable should that need come in. It goes. The other thing, Fukushima changed the world's view on accidents. Prior to Fukushima, it was generally assumed everywhere that if there was a nuclear plant accident, it would be limited to one reactor, and that would be the only problem in that community. Fukushima showed us that we had 3 reactors and 6 spent fuel pools to deal with. On-site resources were strained beyond capacity. In addition, Japan had a lot of other issues to deal with other than Fukushima. So it strained the ability of responders to deal with all of the crises or all the problems on their plate. One of the Fukushima lessons learned the NRC is acting on is to look at your resources, not only to deal with one reactor so you can take resources from an adjacent reactor at DC Cook, but to assume that both reactors might be challenged. They're also saying that if you're relying very heavily on off-site responders, you got to account for the fact that in certain disasters, the National Guard might be called up. If you're relying on the volunteer fire department that's staffed by a lot of National Guardsmen, those people can't be in 2 places at the same time. So those kinds of things have to be considered into dealing with being able to deal with a crisis that might affect our sites so we don't come up short like the Japanese came up short. The last item was after the 1979 accident at 3 Mile, for which I have a solid alibi. The NRC required better severe accident training procedures for the plants. They were developed, they were the same ones that were used in Japan unsuccessfully. After Japan, after Fukushima, the NRC sent inspectors out to all the plants to audit those procedures for severe accidents. I forget the exact numbers, but it was something like 11% of the plants didn't even have these procedures in the control room. Something like 45% of the plants never trained their workers on the use of these procedures. At an even higher percentage, more than half the plants never retrained their workers on the use of these procedures. The NRC felt, and we agree, that it's unlikely that workers who could, even if they're able to find these procedures and break them out of shrink wrap, find the right portion of the test, use it for the first time, will be successful in implementing and dealing with a crisis under all the stressful conditions that can occur. So they're looking at, they haven't yet, but they're looking at upgrading the provisions for operator training or worker training more broadly to ensure that. That's a similar concern that we have about the equipment itself. How do you ensure that it's reliable, it's replicated on the human side, and how do you ensure that the workers have the training, have the procedures. For example, when the NRC went into the reactor in my state, Watts Bar in Tennessee, they found that these emergency procedures told the operators, in case of hydrogen problems, which was a problem at Fukushima, to go turn on the hydrogen recombiners that combine hydrogen molecules and oxygen molecules back into water to deal with a hydrogen threat in case of an explosion. Good direction, but years before, the hydrogen recombiners had been removed from Watts Bar, but the procedures had never been updated. So even if they found the procedures, broke them out of shrink wrap, found the right section of it, ran down there, there's nothing on the floor because the recombiners have been removed. So the procedure sent workers down the wrong road when they should have been sending them down the right road. That needs to be addressed if our operators are better prepared to deal with the challenges that Fukushima placed. Whether these are good or bad measures is kind of moot at this point because they're all safety IOUs. No one has implemented them. They're good plans. There's work in place. We testified before the NRC Commission a few weeks ago that we're more concerned about getting it right than getting it done by the end of this year, some arbitrary deadline. So let's take the time to get it right, but let's do so with no undue delays. Let's not just sit this on the back burner for six months or whatever, but let's get it right, let's get it done, and let's reduce the vulnerabilities to our reactors. The reactors, Palisades is currently operating with known reactors. The leak problem from last year, the good news about that is that leak has been fixed, although I heard that Palisades had another leak and shut down today, so I appreciate the timing on the part of the consumers or Entergy to prove me wrong again. So it's operating with no reaction. In this case, it's fire protection problems and safety culture problems. If you look at that, Palisades is basically as safe today as Fukushima was on March 10th, 2011. They're protected against the fire unless a fire occurs. Fukushima was protected against a tsunami unless a tsunami occurred. If you look at the risk numbers that are calculated by the owner, the risk of a fire leading to core damage at Fukushima, or Palisades, are in the same ballpark as the odds that a tsunami would lead to core damage at Fukushima. The difference is the tsunami at Fukushima could lead to 3 reactor core damages. There's only 1 reactor core at Palisades, so you can't melt down more than 1. But that's minor concession to you folks, because you'll all lose your homes. Anybody who lives around this area will lose your home if that occurs. I mentioned that the survey last year, that was submitted last year, showed that the majority of workers at Palisades don't trust the management there. If that's the case, why should the NRC or the public or us trust the management either? As a minimum, there's a perception problem. Management's doing the right thing, but it's a closely guarded secret. The workforce doesn't know it. The other extreme is that they've got it right. Management's not doing a good job. Either way, there's a lot of work to be done there, so the workforce believes in management, that the NRC trusts in management, and we can trust in management. Right now, that's not the case. I don't have the slide for it, but last November, the NRC's Inspector General reported on the results of its survey of the NRC's workforce by an independent consultant. The NRC Inspector General has been doing these surveys every 3 years for about 15, 16 years. In the latest survey, 41% of the NRC workforce does not believe that NRC senior managers are fixing identified problems. 51% of the NRC workforce knows of a colleague who's received negative reaction to voicing a concern. Over half of the safety regulators feel they know of somebody who's been retaliated or received a negative response for raising a safety concern. That's unacceptable. When Davis-Besse was shut down in 2002 to 2003, it fixed its hardware problems by fall of 2003. It was trying to restart. The NRC said that the safety culture at Davis-Besse did not allow that plant to be restarted. The safety culture survey at Davis-Besse was better than the safety culture survey at the NRC. If the NRC required Davis-Besse to fix its safety culture, they need a mirror and apply that same fix to its own safety culture problems. These studies aren't done every 3 years to fill up a bookshelf. They're done every 3 years to provide insights to management on what to address, what problems there exist, and how to address them. The NRC's not doing that. I have a meeting in a couple of weeks with the NRC Inspector General and the NRC Chairman, not at the same time, to talk about these issues, because we feel the NRC's letting the public down by not doing its job. The Inspector General investigates the NRC wrongdoing. The NRC Chairman can help voluntarily fix some of the NRC, make the NRC do its job better. And I need, to be fair, and I don't have a slide for it, but the NRC can do a good job. We don't think the NRC is fundamentally flawed and needs to be replaced by another agency that can do the job right. We think the NRC does the job right most of the time. What we want to see is the NRC do the job more, not 100% of the time, that's unrealistic, but as close to 100% as possible. An example of the NRC doing its job well occurs back in fall of 2010. NRC inspectors went to the Fort Calhoun plant in Nebraska. They found that that plant wasn't protected against flooding the way it should be. The company said, we've been operating for 30 years, flooding hasn't been a problem, can't you just leave the status things as is? The NRC listened to that argument, they rejected that argument, and they made the owner go out and fix the flooding protection problems. In June of 2011, that plant became an island in the Missouri River. The plant was flooded between where it had been and where the NRC made it fix to. I'm not saying that but for that NRC action that would have been an American Fukushima or a Nebraska nuclear nightmare, but the NRC's action made that plant better prepared to deal with the challenge it faced. So we think, and the NRC did that without an utterance from us, without a complaint from us. There may be a lesson in that. They also did it without pressure from the Senate. That was an internal NRC catch. They can do a good job. They listened, they rejected, they required it to be fixed. We would like to see that emulated in the Palisade leaks, the fire protection, and some other problems. What we think, what we've said not so much that we think, but what we've seen is that public outcry can help the NRC hasten the pace of its reforms. I often say, that the NRC stands for the Nielsen Ratings Commission. A few headlines, TV story, a headline, a letter from an elected official can kick the NRC's game up, crank it up to 11 for those Spinal Tap fans in the crowd. The NRC, it's like the squeaky wheel gets in oil. The more voices that are added to the choir, the more letters the NRC gets from complaints, the more likely the NRC is to up its game and meet that challenge and hasten those reforms. Another example of that is the San Onofre plant in California, which has been shut down for over a year. It had some problems with its steam generators. Those problems, had they occurred in any other plant, those plants likely, the fixes would have been okayed and the plant restarted. But that plant's in California. Senator Boxer from California chairs an NRC oversight committee. Senator Feinstein from California chairs the NRC's committee that oversees its budget. They're concerned about that problem. The NRC mirrors that concern as it required additional measures at San Onofre that no other plant in the country would have had to meet. We're not complaining that's bad. We're complaining the NRC should apply that same rigor elsewhere, not just in it, or move all the plants to California. Whatever it takes to fix this problem, let's do it. As far as how you can make a difference, you've taken many steps already, including the step tonight. I've often noticed that our form of democracy is best when it's not a spectator sport. When people get involved, add voices to the choir, a letter to the editor, an op-ed, a letter to our congressman, a call to our congressman saying we're concerned about the fire protection or lack thereof at Palisades. We'd like to see that fixed. Often get the congressman to write a letter to the NRC saying, can't you do something, knock, 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 can't you do something about this? Congressman Markey is famous for writing letters to the NRC, asking for fixes to this, that, or the other. The NRC literally calls them Markey-grams in emails we've obtained under Freedom of Information Act, but they get results. Nobody likes having a spotlight put on them when they're not doing a good job, so that kind of pressure gets results. UCS has got a website. We created a web page on our website. Our website, by the way, is www.ucsusa.org. We have a web page where we have a number of things that other people have done. We have some of our own templates for letters to the editor or letters to elected officials, letters to the NRC. We also have links to or copies of letters that other mayors or council members or elected officials sent to the NRC asking for help. So there's some things that you could use to see what might work in this community to try to hasten the pace of these reforms. Because we think even though the fires and all are not likely to happen tomorrow, if a fire were to occur at a plant that leads to disaster, at one of the plants where the NRC's known about the problem and done little to fix it, the tragedy would be made worse by the very clear implication, had the NRC just done its job, that accident could have been avoided. We don't need to have Americans face disaster and then have that overlaid with the knowledge that they might have been protected had the NRC just done its job. I work with a lot of groups around the country, and one of the things several of them picked up on is bumper stickers that say, look me in the eye and tell me this plant is safe. Right now, if the NRC were to say that at fire protection at Palisades, they could say it, but they'd be lying. That plant is not safe when it's operating with known fire protection regulations. The NRC has no standard to judge safety other than the regulations. They could paper, rock, scissors. They could do any number of things. They could have gut feelings. That's not the regulation. The standard is compliance with the regulations. That plant is not in compliance. If that plant were to have an accident that harms people, they'd be just as liable as the tavern owner that sells 20 drinks to a patron and gives him the keys to his car. The NRC needs to do better than the irresponsible tavern owner. Or they can go across the street. Right across from NRC headquarters is a McDonald's. If the NRC wants to serve the American public, give away or sell French fries. They don't give away. Sell French fries at McDonald's because they're not doing it when they allow plants to operate in violation of federal safety regulations. They have a contract with the American public. They need to honor that contract or get out of the way. Thank you. I'd be glad to entertain any questions or hear any comments. Yes, ma'am.